Hello, and welcome to a philosophical thought experiment podcast. I came across a really interesting article written by Sean Black in Telegram about soulless beings. So I want to present that article as a sort of thought experiment, and you are welcome to either take it metaphorically or literally. That's your own prerogative. I've got some nice soothing sounds in the background, sounds of a babbling brook in case you're wondering what that sound is. Sean Black writes, in light of the insanity, and I mean psychopathic insanity, within his own family and other stories on here and everywhere, over the past 2 years, and especially increasing in intensity over the past 6 to 12 months, and with regards to the newfound information, there is absolutely no doubt that there is a substantial part, and I mean 50%-ish, of humanity right this very moment that do not have a spirit, and only a rudimentary form of a lower degree soul. These beings, and they make up a large percentage of the world around us, merely mimic fully sentient human being souls, such as us, with the faculties of higher intelligence, emotional awareness, and coupled with self-awareness of the divine creation principle, i.e., God-mind. This might seem shocking at first, and it has been slightly shocking to me, or better yet, an exciting revelation. However, the manner in which I was able to verify this information left zero doubt in my mind as to the veracity of it. We are surrounded by agents of human, quote, beings that mirror almost perfectly the human beings we consider ourselves to be 100% body, 100% soul, 100% spirit. However, there is not the human race. There are two human races that are so similar as to be mistaken for one race, yet so vastly different as to be taken for different sentient beings entirely. Do you not sense it, regardless of what you think you know? It is unmistakable that this chasm which all us God-living, humanity-unifying people wish to bridge between the asleep and us awake can and will never be able to be bridged. There are certain sections of the asleep which have the potential for divine soul development, but there is a large chunk of people who do not and will never have this potential, as they, by definition of who and what they are not self-aware, individualized consciousness. They are mimics and consumers of full potential in spirit, soul, body, human beings, and their energetic God energy potential and actualization. Vampires. He then discusses a German word which, forgive me for the mispronunciation, but it's something like Schöpferkraft, and he breaks it up what that word means. It's made of two main components. One, the power of creation, which is sort of abstract, and two, to ladle, to scoop, which is more physical, real world. To understand the entirety of the word Schöpferkraft, we need another word, a biblical word. This is the missing silent third axis of the word, Schöpferkraft. So basically, you are schöpfen, drawing up, ladling, scooping from the quell, the well, the source, using craft, power. It is an ambiguous word because it can be used either passively. There is always an outpouring of Schöpferkraft from the infinite fountain, i.e. God's power, regardless of whether we use it, or we can actively engage with it and use it, drawing power from the source. There is also a verb of this concept, ich schöpfe Kraft. I am drawing power from the source. It's a great language concept because within it is embedded our Creator, God. This concept will help the discourse of the souled versus the unsouled. So whenever I say souled, I actually mean souled, as in SOULED. It can be quite difficult to hear that. So what I will say, instead of saying sold versus unsold, and you won't be thinking of buying, selling, I will say with soul and without soul. So that's the only difference I'm going to make to his article. So he says, are we surrounded by human beings that do not have a soul? What is the soul? In which way does the soul differ from spirit? Do we have spirit? What is spirit? Are there people who do not have spirit but have a soul? What is the soul? If we want to understand what is happening now in and on this world and our own personal surroundings, friends and family, we must try and define and understand this world and now. Whether we talk about military happenings, the Great Awakening, the Matrix control system, or the vid, it's all largely irrelevant if we talk about it from the same vantage point we had before it all started. It would be like trying to explain higher mathematics without being able to count to 10. So we have to somehow zoom out of the entirety of the space-time continuum, outside of the concept of cause and effect, and look at reality as a whole, incorporating as much as possible new retro ideas, because otherwise trying to understand or even acknowledge the current physical consequences is futile. First of all, what is the problem? The problem is that to come to an understanding, modern society has traditionally, recently, employed techniques of fact-finding that are based largely on logic, reason, and the scientific method, as these techniques enable concluding whether something is real or not. What we have found during the past 2 years especially is that this type of inquiry is inadequate for explaining the insanity we are witnessing. Now, each and everyone here, literally everyone reading this, listening to this, will have over the past 2 years especially witnessed within one's own physical environment, friends and or family members that have gone totally insane. Through the truth movement, we've garnered that this is all a psychological mind control operation, and there are certain people who have unplugged from the mind control through active research and discernment, and many others just haven't turned off the TV. But more recently, this seems to be far too simplistic an explanation. This implies that we can, within the physical world that we know, rationally explain the insanity with, well, it's all just frequency wars and the mind programming is happening through fear, and lots of sheep are afraid, so they just go out and get the V so that they can regain their lost freedoms and join the new social bond of the V group, which does what the government tells it to do. So, what is this government? Well, it's a satanic cabal that has its executive minions, and they want total tyranny of the world population, to chip them and have a medical Nazi world order with digital currency, and nobody owns anything, and the globalists are in charge. If we look at the physical result of this type of inquiry, that would seem to be the case. However, it always goes back to what is reality. If we look at reality as an earthling from Earth, then the above explanation suffices. However, If we discard the physical world, even the vibrational quantum world, there must be something else. How would you otherwise explain spirit, and why would spirit be important or even necessary? When we look at certain friends and family members who have not merely just succumbed to the mind control, but that they have expressed certain character traits that we consider, quote, evil, devoid of any type of heart or compassion, naturally, maybe even only subconsciously, we have asked ourselves, are they even human? What defines human? Is it having a body, a mind, a soul, a spirit? And what makes us different from them? Is it because we chose a different path, inquiry into the truth? And if we did choose to go on down that path, what made us choose? To inquire into the nature of reality and the world around us. Was it our choosing to access through the Schöpferkraft, the drawing of God's creative power from the infinite well within our body, soul, spirit complex, whose power equates to the truth? And if we chose, who or what chose? Was it a biochemical reaction? Was it the soul? What force made us do it? Is it merely because we were just not as lazy as the others who decided Netflix was the better option? There must be a higher function and or force, a higher intent that triggered us to go on a path so much more uncomfortable, alienating, vilifying, with guaranteed expulsion from so much we held dear, for us to have gone down this path. Sean Black came across the concept of Die Unbeseelten, the unsouled, last year in some of the German channels that he follows. One particular channel which wove geopolitics, the Book of Revelation, prophecy, satanic cabal, and all sorts of other happenings, specifically always looked at and spoke from the point of view of God, and that everything we see is God's will. He proclaimed that it was all God's will, and what we were seeing now was biblical prophecy being fulfilled. This man spoke specifically many times about die Unbeseelten, the unsouled. He said that there were 1/3 non-human, 1/3 human but lost, 1/3 souled and awake to God, i.e. with soul. He also mentioned the book of Revelation many times, specifically in this case, Revelations 9:13 to 15. 13. The sixth angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming from the four horns of the golden altar that is before God. It said to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. And the four angels who had been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. Further, he mentioned the website Diego many times. He will then discuss and give details about Diego. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but we'll just go with it, which is a weapons systems analysis and forecast company well connected with defense contractors and government agencies like the CIA. So, this Telegram channel called International Man, he said, Diego is a private online source for the military capabilities of the world's nation states. It recently released a shocking 5-year forecast. The report analyzes countries by projected population size, GDP, defense budget, and more. In it, they predict a 70% reduction in the size of the United States population. This is a bold prediction. What are your thoughts on this? Doug Casey replies, I've got to say that I wasn't familiar with Diego. It keeps a low profile. Diego is in the same business as Jane's, which has been in the business of analyzing weapon systems for many decades. A look at the Diego website, which is quite sophisticated, makes it clear we're not dealing with some blogger concocting outrageous clickbait. It seems to be well connected with defense contractors and government agencies like the CIA. They've predicted that about 70% of the US population and about the same percentage in Europe is going to disappear by 2025. It's hard to believe that anybody in their position would make a forecast like that. There's no logical business reason for it, especially since it was done before the vid hysteria gripped the world. It stretches a reader's credulity. Okay. What shocks him is not that a biowar is being researched or even actively wargamed, but that a connected organization like Diego is actually saying it publicly. It's not like what goes on in the spook community is an open book. Diego doesn't explicitly say what exactly will cause the great die-off, but there are many advantages to biological warfare over other types of warfare, so it will probably be featured. It's probably inevitable now that the technology has made it practical. The Diego forecast for 2025 has been since taken off the website, but there is a PDF available, and he puts the link of that. So what is happening right now in the world is that many seemingly disconnected happenings or positings from various different fields such as prophecy, even in warfare as Diego shows, religion, finance, geopolitics, warfare, good versus evil, who am I, what is reality, etc. All these fields are converging into a synchronized timeline where these normally unrelated fields or questions are coming to a head. One cannot exist without the other. It's all pointing towards what could be called a singularity or an event. Obviously, we could choose to ignore all of this and methodically, rationally, empirically refute all those claims. But you and I know there are no coincidences anymore. So, let's go into the world of and the definition of the soul and why it might become important. Tom Montauk, who seems to have been around for the entire lifespan of the interwebs, did a fantastic breakdown of spiritless humans. And Sean Black then copies and pastes a certain amount of this article from 2009, which I will then present in this podcast. I will now read certain paragraphs from the article called Spiritless Humans, written by Tom Montauk. Empty people, puppet people, cardboard cutouts, drones, organic portals, background characters. Why do these terms even exist? Because out of necessity they had to be invented by those who independently noticed the same puzzling phenomena, one for which there is no official name. Some people seem to be missing something very important inside. While they are not necessarily any less intelligent, successful, or physically healthy as anyone else, they nevertheless show no indication of having any higher components to their consciousness. Over the years, I have received emails from readers who came to this same conclusion. They noticed that some people were strangely one-dimensional and hollow inside. This observation is not hard to miss, but it is easy to rationalize away, especially with modern society being so heavily brainwashed with the politically correct but unrealistic concept that everyone is completely equal in every way, which ignores functional differences due to environmental, genetic, and most importantly, metaphysical factors. Background. The idea of empty people first dawned on me in 1999 after having done much research into sociopaths and psychopaths, their condition being medically known as APD or antisocial personality disorder. My interest in the subject grew out of having been forced for many years to suffer under someone whom I later learned had all the signs of being a sociopath. Heartless and soulless were descriptive terms, but little did I know just how literally true they were. I had noticed in this person an emptiness behind the eyes and a very shallow conscious essence, which seemed to be at the root of the behaviors I observed. Eventually, I realized that this same root condition was present in some others who were not outwardly sociopathic, but whose lack of heart was masked by a well-adapted social exterior. In other words, what psychiatry would diagnose as APD was only the more extreme, criminal, sloppy manifestation of a condition that otherwise expressed itself more widely in a socially acceptable and less incriminating manner. The latter is what may account for the body of empty people present in the population. But what exactly is missing in them? The answer is clear if we look at their common behaviors and qualities of consciousness. Behavioral and psychic characteristics. Their behavior tends toward being glib, shallow, egotistical, narcissistic, mundane, predatory, and materialistic. Sometimes these traits are camouflaged by a polished social exterior, but anyone with a discerning eye can see through the disguise. They lack individuality, independent thinking, and are strongly biased toward holding a herd mentality. They lack comprehension of anything beyond the material sphere of the five senses and have no interest in such metaphysical matters except as flashy accessories to boost their social image. They also appear entirely incapable of empathy, soul-searching, and willful self-sacrifice. Nevertheless, in the presence of others, they can put on a flashy show of concern, distress, or altruism for purposes of social manipulation. For example, crocodile tears to elicit sympathy, or doing something nice for another solely to guilt-trip them later and extort a favor. Psychically scanning their consciousness reveals something interesting. There is a certain simplicity, flatness, and inertness to their essence, even if their intellects are highly developed. Unlike other people, their conscious energy is more diffuse, dull, impermanent, and amorphous rather than solid, sparkling, crystallized, and concentrated. Put another way, their minds are like sandcastles instead of real castles. There is something animalistic and rudimentary piloting their bodies. It seems they have conscious awareness just as plants and animals do, but not conscious self-awareness as humans are supposed to have. There is an important difference between awareness and self-awareness. Spirit, the missing component. The missing factor must be something that endows a being with self-awareness, volition, and the capacity to value transcendental ideals. This goes beyond mere physical factors like missing portions of the brain, defective genetics, or a poor upbringing, because the latter are just defects in the hardware and programming of the biological machine, whereas the problem here involves the consciousness intuitive or clairvoyant perception picks up about their consciousness involves metaphysical factors instead. What to call this higher component of consciousness absent in some people? Usually it would be called the soul, but that has caused too much confusion in the past. For example, casual readers unfamiliar with the proper definition of soulless thought it meant completely devoid of consciousness, when in reality it meant devoid of individualized consciousness. No, they do have some kind of soul energy by virtue of being alive, but the soul is not imbued with the higher spark of true sentience and self-awareness. Therefore, I will call this higher spark spirit and define it as follows. Spirit is the core of individualized consciousness, that permanent aspect of one's being representing the true self, which accumulates experiences and spiritual wisdom throughout life, survives physical death, and remains intact upon reincarnating to continue growing toward the fulfillment of its potential. As a side note, I'm not sure I completely subscribe to the idea of reincarnation, but for the purpose of this essay, I will just continue reading it. But yeah, personally, I'm not sold on it. Okay, it is the divine God spark, the seat of free will, the holographic fragment of the Creator, residing at the very center of your being. The I that is you, the inner conscious observer, capable of observing even its own self-observation. It seems not all humans have spirit, therefore they have no self-awareness, individuality, wisdom, empathy, creative intelligence, or conscious. What further confirms this hypothesis is that, as will be discussed later, one may observe a total absence of destiny, synchronicity, symbolic dreams, spiritual lessons, soul growth, and karma in their lives. This is to be expected if they have nothing permanent in them that survives death and reincarnates, because only spirit can gain from such things. Without spirit, they are temporary beings whose awareness forms shortly before birth and dissolves shortly after death. And if so, then for them spiritual life lessons serve no purpose. Karma from past lives does not exist. There is no higher self acting as chaperone, nor would they have genuine interest in anything that serves a purpose beyond their current mortal existence. Therefore, it is to be expected that they be particularly materialistic, worldly, and mundane in their ambitions. Observation confirms this as well. So I'm just going to end that right there, and I will continue this essay in the next part, where I will actually continue reading from Tom Montauk's essay about spiritless humans. Thanks for listening. Bye.